Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'll be giving my updated 2026 governor election map prediction. So let's start off with the safe states for the Democrats. We have California, Colorado, Hawaii, Illinois, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Maryland, putting those safe states at 8. Now let's go to the Republican safe states. We have Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, and Vermont, putting their safe states at 12. Now let's go to the likely states for each party. Now, just as a reminder, likely states are between 6 and 12 points, and safe states are 12 or more for each party. So the Democrats' likely states, the first one that I have is the state of New Mexico. Now, looking back at the 2022 election, and what was supposed to be a red wave for the Republicans, Michelle Lujan Grisham won by 6.4%. Now, a lot of people thought that this was going to be a closer race, but it never really ended up materializing. And in the 2024 election, we see that New Mexico went for Harris by 6 points. So not too much of a shift in New Mexico. And so because of its partisan lean and because it's going to be a more blue national environment, I have this as a likely margin. The next state that I have as a likely margin is the state of Maine. Now, back in the 2022 election, Janet Mills won Maine by 13 points. But then you saw Trump made some gains in Maine. We see that Harris really only won the state by 7 points. Now, there has been some rumors that the very popular Congressman Jared Gordon might run for Maine governorship. And if he does, I do think he'll bump this up to a safe state, but I don't know if he's going to run right now, and so for right now, I'm going to put this in the likely margin. Another state that I have as a likely margin is the state of Pennsylvania. We see that Josh Shapiro, back in 2022, won the state by 15 points. Now, that's a big accomplishment in and of itself. To win a swing state that actually now went for Trump by about 1.7%, to win a state by 15 points, that's a big accomplishment. Now, yes, Doug Mastriano was probably one of the worst candidates that Republicans could have run, if not the worst. But I still do believe that Josh Shapiro is going to win by a pretty big margin. Look at this poll. We see that this is an approval rating poll. And according to ABC News, we see that Josh Shapiro has a net 25% approval rating, 26% approval rating in swing state Pennsylvania. And that is very, very uncommon because usually swing states are very polarized. And so because he has this big of an approval rating, I see him winning this by a likely margin. Another state that I have as a likely margin is the state of Minnesota. Now, looking at Minnesota, Tim Walz won Minnesota by a pretty big margin, by about 7 or 8 points. Now, Tim Walz might run again in Minnesota. I don't really think it makes a difference if he runs or if he doesn't. Minnesota is just an ideological, more left-leaning state. And so for that reason, I have it in the likely column. And so that's going to be it for the likely states for the Democrats. Now let's go to the likely states for the Republicans. And there's a lot of them, so let's get into it. The first one I have is Alaska. Now, Alaska has been trending to the left over the last election cycles, but Mike Dunleavy has been a very popular governor of Alaska. He won by about 25 points, and the reason he did that is because Alaska has a system of ranked choice voting, where basically they get to rank their top 5 candidates, and if no one gets to 50%, then the lesser candidates, their votes get taken out, and the second choice goes to one of the 2 major candidates. And so in this case, let's say that Mike Dunleavy didn't get to 50%, then the votes would be taken away from Bill Walker and Charlie Pierce and given to either Les Guerra or Mike Dunleavy. And what we see is he won outright. It didn't even have to go to another round of ranked choice voting. But now he's going to have to retire because he is term limited. And there has been some speculation that Mary Peltola might run in Alaska. Now, for those who don't know who Mary Peltola is a very popular congresswoman, a Democratic congresswoman who went down by 2 points in this election. So if she runs in Alaska, I do think she could make it competitive. But I don't think it would be enough. Now for right now, I'll put this in the likely column, but if she decides to run, I could definitely put this in the lean column, or maybe even the tilt column if it comes to that. Another state that I have as a likely margin is the state of Nevada. Now, Nevada was a state that was actually controlled by a Democrat until 2022, when Joe Lombardo flipped the state from Steve Sisolak. And people in Nevada mostly like Joe Lombardo. If we look at his approval rating, we see he has a plus 21.7% approval rating, much like Pennsylvania, which Josh Shapiro has a 26% approval rating. So he is very, very approved of. I do think he's kind of the opposite of Josh Shapiro, and so for that reason, I'm going to put this in the likely margin. Another likely margin that we have is the state of Kansas. Kansas' governor is actually a Democrat, and Kansas on the presidential level goes very Republican. We see that Trump won the state by 16 points. But Laura Kelly right now is actually the governor, and she won by 2 points. She flipped the state in 2018 in the blue wave environment by 5 points, and she is going to be term limited. So that means that a Republican is most likely going to flip this. Now, I'm not going to have it in the safe column, just because looking back at 2014, which was really a red wave, we see that the Republican, Sam Brownback, only won by 4 points. The Kansas GOP is not very competent, and because of that, I have it as a likely margin as of right now. Another likely margin that I have is the state of Ohio. Now, looking at Ohio, we see that Mike DeWine won in 2022 by 25 points. But Mike DeWine is more seen as an establishment Republican, and some people even call him a rhino. He has more moderate policies, and that's why he attracts some liberal votes. But there has been speculation that Vivek Ramaswamy might run here, and he's a more hardline Republican. He would not attract liberals to vote for him. And so because Vivek Ramaswamy does look like the front runner in this race, I see this as a likely margin. And then another likely margin that I have is the state of Iowa. Now, usually this would be a safe margin for a Republican, considering that Trump won the state by about 13 points. And if you look back at the last election, Kim Reynolds, the governor of Iowa, is up by 19 points. But the only thing about that is Kim Reynolds is not really that well liked. If we look at her approval rating in Iowa, we see that she's only above water by 0.7%. in deep red Iowa. So that's not good for a Republican governor. And because she's not very well liked in Iowa, I have this as a likely margin. And then the last likely margin that I have is the state of New Hampshire. In the 2024 election, Kelly Ayotte won by 9 points against Joyce Craig. And so right now, it does look like she's going to be one of those more popular governors like Chris Sununu was. So unless something happens or she dips in her approval rating, I see this as a likely margin. Now let's go to the lean margins. Let's start off with the Democrats. The first lean margin that I have is the state of Oregon. And really, there's only one reason why I have it as a lean margin, and that's because the incumbent Democrat Tina Kotek really doesn't have an approval rating. She's not liked in Oregon. And looking back at the 2022 election in Oregon, we see she only won by 3.5%. And Oregon Democrats have had a history of underperforming in their races. Let's look back at 2018, the blue wave environment. Kate Brown, she only won by 6.4%. Not a good showing. And then looking back here, we see that John Kitzhaber only won by 5 points in 2014. And so, yes, a big reason why she only won by 3.5% was because Betsy Johnson was on the ballot. But I still probably do see an independent running and really shrinking her margin. And also, she's not that popular. And that's why I have this as a lean margin. The next lean margin that I have is the state of New York. Now, much like Tina Kotek, Kathy Hochul is not well liked. I'm pretty sure a poll came out showing that actually she has like a 39% favorability rating and 47% disapprove of her job. And so that's not good for Kathy Hochul, considering she's in deep blue New York. Now, yes, New York did become more competitive in this election. If we look at the results, we see that Harris won it by 12.6% when Biden won by 23 points. But still, this is not good numbers for a Democrat in New York. And if Republicans put up someone like Mike Lawler, you could definitely see this becoming competitive. But for right now, I'm going to put it in the lean margin. Another lean margin that I have is the state of Wisconsin. Tony Evers won in 2022 by about 3 points against Tim Michels, who actually had a lot of money to spend on this race. Also, the Wisconsin Democratic Party is very competent. Ben Wickler, the state party chair, has done a good job for the party, and Republicans have been struggling in Wisconsin. Now, I do want to look at how the Supreme Court race goes. Maybe if Republicans do well in that, I could bump it down to tilt margin, but for right now, I'll put it in the lean margin. Now, let's go to the Republican lean states. The first one that I have is the state of Arizona. Now, Katie Hobbs really pulled off an upset in 2022 by defeating Kari Lake. Looking at her approval rating from last year, we see that she only has a plus 6.2% approval rating. And yeah, this was from last year. Now I'm pretty sure, has actually a lower approval rating. So because she's unpopular, and I do see like someone like Andy Biggs running, that's why I see this flipping to the Republicans by a lean margin. And then another state that I have as a lean margin is the state of Georgia. Now, Georgia has been a Republican state for a long time, but because of the left-leaning suburbs, it has become more competitive in recent elections. Donald Trump won Georgia by 2.2%, and the state has been a left-trendy one because of the suburbs. So if these suburbs continue to go left, you could see a Democrat governor pull it off. Now, I do think if Republicans nominate someone like Herschel Walker or a bad candidate, I could see Democrats winning this. Brian Kemp, the popular governor in Georgia, is going to have to retire, and that's going to be a blow for the Republicans because Brian Kemp has made these elections in Georgia not competitive. If you look back at the 2022 election, you see that Brian Kemp won his election by around 8 points against Stacey Abrams. And yes, Stacey Abrams was not a good candidate, but still, that's very impressive to do in a state like Georgia. So for right now, I'm going to put it in the lean margin. I think if Brad Raffensperger runs, I think it'll be a lean margin, but if Republicans choose somebody else, I'll probably put it in the tilt margin. And then we have one last race, and that is in the state of Michigan. Now, usually I would put this in the Democratic column because Michigan, on the governor level, usually picks Democrats. If we look back at the 2022 election, we see that Gretchen Whitmer won her governor race by about 11 points. But the reason why I have this as a toss-up or even a Republican pickup is because Mike Duggan, the Democrat mayor of Detroit, is going to be running as an independent. And because he's running as an independent, that's going to split the vote between the Democrats and the independents. And so I do see that right now, just barely, I think that that's going to split the vote enough to create a Republican governor in Michigan. So this is my updated prediction for the month of February. Republicans pick up the governors of Arizona, Kansas, and Michigan, and win 21 states. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to smash the like button down below and subscribe. Comment your thoughts or suggestions in the comment section down below. Shout out to Diana Barbie, our first channel member. If you would like to become a member, you can join near my channel logo. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.